So I grew up with wrestling by my brother doing things to me. We would watch wrestling every Saturday morning and Glow as well. We'd take pillows and set up things, but not like where it was like programmed. Like I wasn't like, oh, I love wrestling. Like I'm still not even a TV person like that.
I didn't know how I was gonna do it.
But at a young age, I told myself I'm gonna be a wrestler when I grew up. And here we are today.
So it's really interesting, my relationship with wrestling.
To this day, we still have this reaction of, oh, it's fake. But you wouldn't say that about a movie.
Oh, this is wrestling.
I've heard so many horror stories about people entering into the wrestling world.
And you just kind of look at them and it gives you that little fire under your butt, you know, like, okay, let's do this.
Everything that's happened in wrestling, it's just made me who I am. And that's what's up.
So the first time I became aware of wrestling was when I must have been about 8 or 9, and I had this magazine for teenagers called Bravo in Germany. And it was mainly about pop stars and TV stars. And one day there was an article in it about Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, and they were gearing up for their big WrestleMania event. And it was written as if it was all true, as if they were real, the characters were real people. And I was just so fascinated by the idea that the Ultimate Warrior, you know, it said nobody knows where he's from or who he really is. And I was like, wow. And then not to mention, back in those days, they really looked larger than life. You know, they didn't look like real people. So, I mean, some of them still don't. And so I was just so intensely fascinated with it. And that's when I became aware of it. And then later, when I was a teenager, we got cable TV and I started watching it and I was hooked, as they say.
I was about 10 years old when my friends invited me over. Hey, do you want to come watch Raw? Wrestling's on tonight. And I never watched wrestling. My parents never watched it growing up. It wasn't in my family. But my friend Megan, who was my best friend at the time, she was like, come on, let's watch some wrestling. And they sort of introduced it to me. And I just remember seeing Chyna for the first time. And I immediately was just like, wow, what is this? You know, this badass woman is out there. You know, she doesn't look, she's strong, she's buff, and she's beating guys and whipping their butts. So I just fell in love with the theatrics and the athletics, you know, the two coming together, because growing up I was involved with both theater and also sports. So I found a way to kind of put the two together, and, you know, wrestling is just amazing.
So it's really interesting, my relationship with wrestling, because it's kind of like how my career went, a very on and off again relationship. But the first memory I truly had was when I was a little girl and Cyndi Lauper was involved. That was like it for me, because I just loved Cyndi Lauper so much as a little girl. I thought she was so cool, and she was very feminine, but at the same time like funky and had her own vibe. So like, I get when celebrities go and endorse things or they have these little crossovers, because it worked for me. Like, it got me to like really pay attention. Like before I was like, oh, it's cool, and I would watch it and it was magical. But when Cyndi Lauper's like, I had to watch it. What was she gonna do? Like, she's not a wrestler, she's Cyndi Lauper, the singer. Like, what is she, like, is she gonna get involved? And then when there was those times where she would get like physical and she would be in there, and maybe in her own right, like kind of like a Wonder Woman, because, you know, they kind of like, Captain Lou would be terrible to her and she'd stand up for herself. And then it's like, and then you have girls who just want to have fun, and who's in there being a bully to her. It seemed unreal. It totally just seemed magical and unreal. Cyndi Lauper is who made me tune in the whole time.
New Hulk Hogan, new like the big names. And for Glow, it was really interesting because it was like girl wrestlers and there was like blood, but it was like too scary. But I liked watching it.
So at that time, there really wasn't that much women wrestling, except for Glow. My upbringing was not the best. And when I would watch Glow, I just couldn't believe these women that were on there. I couldn't believe that there was people, like, I loved Americana, these Glow women, and they were doing stuff that like the guys were doing, you know? It was crazy. And then fast forward freaking, there goes Al Bundy getting his butt kicked by them. And then on Roseanne, you know, same thing. Aunt Jackie gets beat up. It's just like, they were part of something.
I love Glow. I got a lot of my inspiration from the original Glow. And the fact that they brought it back, and I absolutely loved watching it. I'm kind of sad they ended it, or they canceled it. But I thought it was a good, for those who hadn't seen the original Glow, and it made it more modernized because the old Glow is kind of cheesy, So this was a fun take to get more viewers, more people like, oh, shoot, wrestling, okay. More eyes on the product.
Well, the only exposure to wrestling I had growing up was WWE and WCW. And there was very few women wrestlers in it. So it was pretty much, I think, Alundra Blaze, and that was it. And then for WrestleMania or some of the bigger pay-per-views, they would bring her in, and then some of the Japanese women, because women's wrestling in Japan has always been big and always been super tough and always been on a level with the guys. So they would bring her in, and then some of the Japanese women usually to have a match. And then obviously Luna Vachon came through, and she was, a real wrestler. And there was wrestling was around before that too. But I think in WWE for some reason, or WWF at the time, maybe they just weren't so sold on having, women wrestlers. And so for that reason, they didn't really have storylines when I saw it, other than the managers. So, and I like storylines. So it's hard for me to get behind a wrestler unless they have really, a strong character or a strong storyline or something like that.
High school, my freshman year, is when I was faced with bullying, and it was terrible to the point where it was a very hard life. It was hard to maintain. It was hard to live. It was hard to wake up every day after that. So that kind of set the tone for my high school life, which means I wasn't happy. And that's when I found acting. And acting was the thing that gave me something exciting and happy to look forward to, because I got to be someone else. I didn't have to be Kita. That is how I initially started everything, was I went on an audition for a superhero. Do you remember that show Heroes? That was like that sci-fi show? Yeah. So I thought I was on an audition for that. My agent's like, you got an audition. It's at 3:00, Studio City, blah, blah, blah. I show up and I'm like, this looks kind of interesting. It wasn't my normal, you walk in, you sign in, you wait, they call your name, you go into another room, you go. Girls were going in groups and then in there for 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, how much long? What is this? And I called my agent and I was like, are you sure this is Heroes? It's kind of weird. It says superheroes. And he looked and he's like, oh my God, it's not. It's for a pro wrestling show. It's superheroes. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I'm not pro wrestling some girl. Are you out of your mind? In my brain, all I thought about was China. That was the only woman who I associated with a female wrestler. I am 5'3" and weigh 117 pounds. China is 5'9" and a big girl, right? Why would you send me on this shit? Literally had my hand on the doorknob to walk out, oh yeah, I'm out of here. And one of the producers, David McLean, actually the creator of Glow Wrestling, said, hey, where are you going? I was like, I'm on the wrong audition. And he was like, you might as well just stay and watch. It's Friday and it's 5:00. So no matter where you're going, you're not gonna get there. So I stayed for the whole process, right? I watched the whole thing happen, and they had girls go in the ring. They hit the ropes. One girl picked up another girl, suplexed her, mind you, way bigger than me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Still wanted no part of it. And was like, cool, thanks for that, and left. And they gave me the waiver. And so I went home and I thought about it. And the last girl that got into the ring, her name is Lana Starr. And one of the other wrestlers threw Lana into the ropes, and Lana picked her up literally and slammed the shit out of her. Lana's petite, skinny, maybe a little taller than me, but definitely not as muscular or athletic looking. And so when she did that, I was like, how did she do that? she just slammed the shit out of this girl. And the girl was like, oh, and Lana was like, yeah. And I was like, how did she do that? That was pretty cool. This tiny, skinny ass little girl, like, that was interesting. So that was a seed that was planted. Went home, was talking to my dad that night. And he was like, how was your day, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I went on an audition today for totally by accident, and told him the story. And I said, to be a pro wrestler. And he's like, and I was laughing like, oh my God, can you imagine me wrestling? Oh my, I would die. Like, it was like funny. And he was like, you know, Kita, this actually might be something that can help you and be therapeutic for you, because your thing is contact and space. I say that, so let me give you a little back history. So even if I went to Trader Joe's and someone was standing right behind me, my heart would start beating and I could feel my throat thickening. And I would have to literally position myself like this so that I could see what's happening, because it just did something to me. Going to a movie theater, I could never not sit in the back row because people are behind me and my heart starts beating. So I definitely had a lot of emotional scars still. Although I'd worked through so much, that was just still something that was handicapping me. And so my dad was like, this might be something therapeutic for you, like learning how to wrestle and not necessarily fight, but you're learning things and you will be in close quarters. It might empower you. And I slept on it and I was like, you're right, as always. And so I went back for the callback. I actually got a callback. I didn't even do anything, but they just wanted to bring us back, I guess, the girls that fit what they were looking for. And I tried it, and they explained the whole audition process. And it was 3 months, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. You literally couldn't really have a job. You had to dedicate your time to this. And that window in my life, I think I was able to do that. I don't even remember. But and I did it, and I made the cut. And out of 200 girls, they kept 18, and I was one of the 18.
I remember seeing a lot of the cat fight wrestling in the very beginning, and so seeing China in a different, spotlight while she was still a sexy symbol, but at the same time she was a tough, she could wrestle with the guys. And then later on, I discovered Molly Holly, who I was a huge fan of, a Jacqueline, the bra and panties matches, which I figured, they were just maybe not real athletes or not real wrestlers, and yeah, maybe they had a model background. And so, as a young girl, it's kind of like, oh, do I have to be a model to do this? But then you would see, Ivory and Molly Holly and China, and you're like, oh, they look like, athletes, not just pretty girls, and they can kick butt. And so that was what drew me, was that aspect, and not so much, because the modeling as a young girl, like, it's, self-esteem issues and all that. So it was nice to see other females, other women, in a different spotlight.
Wrestling was already like a thing in my family, like with the men. So it was around, I was very attracted to it. But Cyndi Lauper is what got me hooked. And I was like, wow, that's really awesome. So I continued to watch, of course, and then in and out of it. And where I really fell in love, like with the Cyndi Lauper, like part 2, was the Attitude Era. When the Attitude Era happened, I was just like, wow. And it really reminded me of kind of the theatrics that were going on with the Cyndi Lauper era. It was campy, it was cheesy, a little over the top, but for some reason you believed it still. Like, it didn't matter how like silly it was, or like it didn't make sense, but you believed it. And I just thought that was really magical, So when the Attitude Era came around, that's when you had all these amazing talent, like not just the wrestlers, but even like the managers and everything. And I just fell in love with it. And I just knew that that's what I was supposed to do. And that's the thing. I know it sounds really generic, but when people are like, oh, who did you look up to? Or it's like, there was people who inspired me, of course, or people that I thought I was a fan of, but there wasn't like a one wrestler that I was like, ooh, I want to be that, or whatever. It was just like, I just wanted to be a part of it. And I knew in my heart and soul, that was just my fate. And people used to think I was crazy. They'd be like, oh, Shelly thinks she's gonna go be some famous wrestler. And people thought I was crazy growing up, but I was like, no, I'm gonna be a wrestler. Yeah, like that's just how I went about it. So it's really interesting because there's times that people made me doubt, made me think I was crazy that I could do it. And at that time, it was old school. Like, it was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I didn't know how to become a wrestler. Back east, because I'm from the West Coast, it's very available. People know that there's indie shows. People go to them, that they know that there's schools. But here, it was like indie shows. There was nothing really going on. I mean, here and there, but people like myself didn't know. I would just stalk WWF when they would come into town. Like, that's what everyone did. So it's just really interesting how, like, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just knew that was what I was supposed to do.
I immediately told myself I want to be a wrestler when I grew up at 10 years old. I did with my friends, we did like the trampoline wrestling, we'd make little videos, and we had, our fun little shows between the few of us. But at a young age, I told myself I'm going to be a wrestler when I grew up. And here we are today.
I always wanted to one day somehow do something in wrestling. It wasn't like my ultimate goal because I was actually an actress and I did film and drama at university. So that was what I was pursuing. And then that's what I went to London to do. But I was always a huge fan of wrestling, or WWE and WCW, that I didn't know there was anything outside of it. So I didn't know that there was a path to become involved or do anything with it. But I always had this idea that, one day I'd like to do something. Long story short, I'm in London and my sister comes to visit, and I'm looking in Time Out magazine for something cool for us to do. And there was a wrestling show advertised, a British wrestling show in London. And I went, holy moly, let's go see that. So we went to see that, and it was in like a nightclub setting. And as we're watching it, I'm going, wow, these are real people. They're not, they're not plastic action figures come to life. These are real people right in front of me, so close, I can touch them. So then that made me realize if they can do it, I can too. And then during the show, in the intermission, actually, I ran up to one of the wrestlers who happened to be Doug Williams. And I said, I want to get involved in this. How do I get involved? And he said to talk to the commentators, who were actually, I didn't know then, but they were running the venue. They weren't running the wrestling. But I talked to them after the show. They had a guy who would do the sound for the show. He would play the entrance musics and stuff. He was dressed up as a mouse. So he had the character of the mouse. And then his gimmick was that during the show, at some point he would go so excited, he would run into the ring and he'd run the ropes back and forth. And the commentators would go, the mouse is in the ring, the mouse is in the ring. So because my name is Kat, we decided that on the next show, the mouse would be in the ring, running the ropes. Commentators, the mouse is in the ring, the mouse is in the ring. The crowd's going crazy. I came out dressed in black PVC as the Cats, and then we had a little match. And then at the end, one of the other guys came in dressed as a dog and chased us off. So it was really dumb. But the point of the story was, I guess that was my very first match. We had two spots, which was a double clothesline, and then I chokeslammed him because that was my favorite move at the time. And other than that, we had zero training. So I don't know, we just kind of mostly messed around in the ring. But then I got to talking to some of the guys backstage, and they were like, oh, you should go find a school. And I had no idea that there was any of this going on. So then I went on the internet and I found a school, which happened to be Hammerlock, UK, which was a mere hour and a half train ride from me. So I started going there on Sundays and training. I was the only woman there. And for about the first 5 years of my career, I only wrestled guys. And I was literally the only woman wrestler on those shows.
It took me a long time before I actually went down the path of wrestling again. I had moved from Massachusetts to Texas, and I was originally going to go back to college for a different degree than I already have. And a friend of mine took me to a local wrestling show, and the passion immediately lit back underneath me because this wrestling show I went to was they were focusing more on the women, so it was a bunch of women matches, and I was like, holy crap, like this is still something I want to do. This is 15 years later after being, you know, a little girl, like, oh, I want to be a wrestler. And so afterwards, I spoke to some of the wrestlers afterwards and asked, you know, like, how do I do this? Because I never really knew how to get involved in wrestling. Like growing up, you know, as a kid looking at wrestling schools, but it didn't really click to me how you actually go about getting involved. And so after talking to some wrestlers, there was a school, I moved to Austin, Texas, and there was a school that was a wrestling school. And about a month later, I walked in and I signed up. And it was a lot different than what I had envisioned. It was a lot harder than I thought. It was, it just immediately changed my whole perspective. Like, oh, this is wrestling.
My brother was a martial artist growing up. Was in Kung Fu forever. I was his dummy. So I got swept all the time. I got put on my back all the time. I got him on top of me all the time. And it sucked. And my dad's a Marine. So it's funny, I literally was just at my dad's house and I was like, why did you not put me in martial arts? Like, why was I in dance and gymnastics and Javon was in Kung Fu? And my dad said, and literally he had a tear come to his eye and he said, I didn't think you would need it. I think that's where it started for me of having a fear of like falling or getting hurt because of my brother, which made me always be like, don't touch me, get away. So even in basketball, like I was not one of the girls that would like run into you and truck you and foul you. Like I was not about that. I was the outside shooter, threes all day. Like I'm not trying to get in the mess part. Track, it's an individual sport. It's just me against me, you know, but not contact. My first taste of that was with WOW, Women of Wrestling.
I love playing a character, so my character is an 80s aerobic instructor, so think Richard Simmons. And I love being Delilah Doom. It's me, but turned up a whole bunch. You know, I do love Richard Simmons. He is an inspiration, but I love being a positive, bubbly character where, you know, I try to get the people up. I love, you know, screaming and shouting and just being over the top wild just to entertain people. It's a great feeling and I absolutely love it. And, you know, I've played a heel for a little bit when I was in my stint at Rise, and it was a whole different game changer where it was definitely more difficult for me because it's not something I'm used to. I'm not used to being, you know, a bad guy or being disliked. So it was a fun challenge that I liked taking on.
So my journey began here in good old California, of course. So I knew I wanted to be a wrestler, didn't know how. Again, I didn't know about the schools or anything. Right out of high school, I went into just full-on acting, modeling mode. So I was doing really good as an independent model. And that was really cool, especially back then. It was really hard. You know, you had to mail out your stuff, your Z card and your headshots. And I was doing it. And what I would do is I would just blab to anyone that would listen about how I loved wrestling. I wanted to be a wrestler. And I knew one day the right person would hear me. And that happened. I did an independent film. It was called Backyard Dogs. They booked me as being one of the wrestler's girlfriend, a little feature background part. So they use local wrestlers, and during downtime, I would just ask them, like, how did you start? You know, what do you do? And that's where, like, okay, you go to wrestling school, you know, like, you got a good look, you could probably be somebody's manager, train to be a wrestler, you put a VHS tape together, and then you mail it off. So I was like, oh, okay, it's like modeling. You just like, and then instead of a headshot, you just get your little reel together. Okay, cool. That's what I did, and I started with that school out in San Bernardino, and I was there for a couple years, and then I left there and I just started to go to different schools. I did Lucha Libre for like a couple years, which was really awesome. I was like the only girl. Shout out WPW. Here's what happened. So the first school I went to, EWF, that's where I really fell in love with wrestling. And when people like ask me the whole question about, like, they assume that I have like this like huge attachment to it, like growing up watching it, whatever. And I have an attachment, but where I felt like in love, like how people do as a fan, was when I was at EWF. And that was because there was this tag team, the Havana Pitbulls, Rocky Romero and Ricky Reyes. They were really awesome wrestlers, and they would like wrestle in Japan, and they would wrestle in Mexico. The one, Reyes, he was kind of like, you had to like earn him to like you. One of those people. He was kind of hard ass, you know? But I liked it because when I would get in the ring, I felt like because of the way I looked, people either would try to hurt me because they wanted to like test me, I guess, or they would go easy on me. And when people would go easy on me, Reyes would go hard on me. But the way he did it, I responded well to it. And I liked it. And it almost gave me like discipline and structure. And I was like lacking it because I didn't have like a great father figure. And even though we're like the same age or whatever, it's like, that's what I needed. And so I like wanted him to like me, but you know, where I come from, you know, can't be all trying all hard. So I was like, I'll just prove myself. And I did. And then to this day, I call him my Mr. Miyagi of wrestling, and we're still cool. And that was like when I fell in love. And then hearing the stories that they would have, like, oh, you know, we went in a van to Mexico. And even though it sounds like a terrible, terrible, like circumstances, I was like, it glamorized it. I was like, dude, that's what I want. I want the stories. I want the connections with these people. I want these friendships and these, it's almost like being in a band, you know, it's like you got these road stories. And then that's when I really fell in love. And I said, this is really what I need to do. It wasn't like, oh yeah, this is what I want. It was like, I need to do this because like, I want to have those stories. I want to have those people that like, when I get married, they're there and like, we're like laughing and like, I wanted that. And it sounded really awesome.
Okay, so I first started at a school called AAPW in Austin, Texas, with George de la Isla, Mr. Mexico. I trained there for about 9 months before switching over to a different trainer there. And then I heard about Funaki School in San Antonio, Texas. And some people that I had met at the wrestling shows told me they trained with Funaki, and they invited me down to, you know, try out a training session with him. And I was like, okay, awesome. So I drove down there, and I just immediately I felt at home. The training, his style, it was just felt more me. It was where I wanted to be because, you know, he trained mostly for WWE, which at the time was my big goal. So while still living in Austin, I drove down to San Antonio every day, 6 days a week, to train with him, and then drive back to Austin, go back to work. And that was my life for a year and a half before I eventually made the move to San Antonio for good to train with Funaki, who I trained with for 4 years. For me, Funaki is the most patient person I've met in my entire life. And for me, learning, I'm not the quickest learner. So it was just a good fit. My learning style and his teaching style just kind of coincided very well.
So that's where I started. And then I did the whole independent thing. And then I was a model for West Coast Choppers and Jesse James. If you guys remember, he had his reality show and everything. He was a buddy of mine. And then one day he was just like, why aren't you in WWF? Like, I was like, I don't know. And then he was like, all right. And the next day I got a phone call, and they asked me if I was affiliated with a certain promoter in Southern California. Now, up until that point, I kind of had this like love-hate relationship with this promoter. And a lot of times I second-guessed myself, thinking like maybe I was being too sassy for my own good, and maybe like I needed to play the game a little bit better, and I didn't, and maybe missed out opportunity. So that was so interesting that when Jesse put his call in, and then John Laurinaitis, the head of the talent at the time, called me and asked me if I was affiliated with that promoter, I was like, no. And I thought there was my missed opportunity. He's like, good, now we can have this conversation. And I was like, whoa! I started to get looked at by WWE for a couple years every time they came to California, or they were in like Nevada, anywhere that was like kind of driving distance. Eventually, they just hired me because they saw that I kept taking their advice. So then, yeah, I went to Kentucky. It's interesting because when I first got there, they said, okay, you're going to be a vampire with Gangrel, this guy, Kevin Seven, and Jimmy Wang Yang. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I am legit a vampire, so awesome. I don't have to play a part. And so I get there, and they tell me, okay, so tomorrow bring your outfit that's kind of like vampire-esque, and we're going to film you for The Office. Okay, cool. So I show up the next day, and I guess after WrestleMania, there's like a bunch of firings that go on, like a suite, because like I think it has to do with like getting ready for the next quarter financially kind of thing. So it's like, this is what they do. When they did that, everyone I was supposed to be on the team with was off on that list. So I was like, wait a second, like I thought I was gonna be this vampire. So I ended up staying in OVW for about a year. And it's so funny because that Kevin Seven guy ended up being Kevin Thorne. And like a year later in the same month, I ended up being a vampire anyways.
So after living in Texas for 5 years, I met my now fiance, Eli Everfly. We actually were set to wrestle each other. And so we had a match at Sabotage, War of the Genders, where we fell in love. And after he proposed to me, I moved out here to California, where I am now. And I had the opportunity to train at Santino's, where he's a trainer at too. And so I've gotten to train with Los Luchas, Eli, Robbie Phoenix, Joey Chaos, Sylvia, all these amazing people. And I have gotten I've become a whole different wrestler, and I've gotten a whole different set of opportunities just from being out here.
So the age-old question is it real? And the answer is kind of complicated.
And it's not fake. The wrestlers have to put in, so much time. They have to put on like their body on their line. It's not just anyone can be a wrestler. It takes a lot of athletic ability. When you're training, you're training with like rolls and footwork, and you have to be coordinated. You got to be tough, because it's not for the weak of heart. Taking those bumps. It's not fake. We put our bodies through a lot, and to call it fake is kind of disrespectful. I like to, it's a play, it's a performance, it's a live action movie. That's, we're not trying to knock each other out, but stuff happens, injuries happen, people do get knocked out. It's not fake.
There is impact. There is a lot of realness that does go into it. But yeah, you're gonna know there's a predetermined winner and loser, because when you have a wrestling show or event, you're gonna build the card up. So it's like you're telling a story from the moment really the people are coming in to like your building to the time they leave. So it's like you're giving them the show, and you got to build that up. So you got to start to play with your audience, and you got to get those reactions. You got to just take them for that ride, because you know what that main event's going to be and what the outcome's going to be. So you got to get them there. And so that is predetermined. However, it just varies. There's times where early in my career, I needed to know every step by step. Okay, we're going to do this, and then I'm going to throw you there. But then as time goes by, it's like a dance. I tell people, if you train to dance, you're a trained dancer. You can go out on the dance floor with another trained dancer, and it doesn't matter what song comes on. You don't have to talk about what dance you're going to do. You just know with how your body's moving and how it's leading and everything. It's the same thing, except, it's wrestling.
When somebody says to me, well, is it fake? First of all, I don't know why they're still asking me that, because nobody's still pretending that we're really fighting, And I think sometimes people they ask that question specifically to antagonize you, because they know most wrestlers get, riled up by it. If somebody says to me, so is it fake? I just said, yeah, it's fake. And I'm not bothered by it at all, but it's also partly because for me personally, when I found out that it wasn't real, for me that made it better. Whereas most people, when they find out it's not real, first they're disappointed.
A lot of people think, oh, it's just so choreographed. And it's like, not always. Sometimes, yeah. But sometimes people need that extra help. And that's the thing in wrestling that irked me is I felt that because the goal is to be that person that can have a match like that, I think people get a little too, they almost feel like, unless you can do that every single time, like you're not a good wrestler. And it's like, no, dude, like what's wrong with if you haven't worked with someone, you want to fill them out. So like, let's go over it a few times. And There was times like before I went to WWE, people kind of would give me a little attitude or make me feel like I'm stupid for like wanting to go over the mat. And it's like acting. You go over your lines over and over. You have a scene with somebody. You're not a bad actor if you have to sit with that person. It's called, you're getting familiar. You want it to flow. You want your audience to think it's real. So go over your lines. That's why go over your match. But there's like, not always, but this misconception that like, and I have felt bullied when people passively just be like, oh, it's almost like, oh, again. And then it's like, dude, come on. And so when I did go to WWE and then I started going back to the indies afterwards, and I was like the vet, so people were like listening to me, I promoted that way of thinking, and so many people were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like sometimes people and then I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. So I just want to throw that one out there. If you're a wrestler and watching this, you go over your match like lines, because that's how you're supposed to do it.
I mean, a little boot to the face of Luster trying to do some sort of damage to rescue Eli Everfly. Casadora.
Well, I thought wrestling was real for the longest time. So that the acting part was more like from the promos and the skits. I enjoyed that a lot, because it was like little mini skits, little mini improvs. But at the time I didn't realize what wrestling was. I thought it was actually fighting. So I thought that's why I was like, oh, even cooler. But the athletic part, obviously you had to have a lot of athletic ability to do what they were doing in the ring. And so seeing the two combined, I just fell in love.
None of it's rehearsed. It's more so we train moves. We train moves, right? Just like in Muay Thai, before you get to spar, you're gonna learn a 1-2. You're gonna learn how to move from a 1-2, right? You're gonna know how to bob, how to weave, how to slip, how to roll, how to duck. So we're learning on both ends. That way, anytime a punch comes, I know what my reaction needs to be. If I punch you, same thing. So I would say wrestling in that way is very similar, that we learn the offense and the defense. That way, no matter what's being done, we know how to work with it.
There was times where I'm like, wait a second, is this really like, did they really get hurt? You know what I mean? Like, is that like, so there was moments like that, and that's to me what captured me the most was, wait a second, I thought I had it figured out, but are they really hurt? Like, did it not go as according to plan? And now that I think of it, that I put a lot of that into my own performance. I used to do a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't really expect me to do, especially when I went back to the indies after WWE. That's when I had a lot of amazing matches. And there's just times like when I trust people, I would lend my body and I would do crazy stuff. Or even when I would just be a manager. I mean, I remember there's a local promotion here in California called CWF Hollywood. And I was on there for a little bit, and I would get in the fans' faces and I would make it look real. And there would be guys who would be pissed because, like, I know this is terrible, but this is how hard, because of how I fell in love with it. I wanted to be that performer. So there was a time I remember at CWF Hollywood, I had some Tic Tacs. No, this guy was like, oh yeah, you need some Tic. And I took the Tic Tacs and I spit him in his face and he went nuts. And I'm not recommending people to, but I was just like, I wanted that reaction of like making him be like, wait a second, this isn't part of the show. She's really disrespectful. This isn't. And that guy, there was this video footage. I don't know where it's at, where we're in each other's, and I get in his face because I know that the people running the show are going to grab me. So, and people didn't expect that. And I just made it real. And like, I'm a real man hater from way back. So I just let him have it. I chose that guy and I let him have it. And that's what I think I fell in love with the most about wrestling as a fan growing up, and the different times I tuned in, is there was people that made me think, shoot, are they being for real?
Well, see, the problem is that people get so hung up on the word fake. And when people say it's fake, they often mean it as an insult, or it's taken as an insult. And so often then wrestlers will get very defensive about it. But to me, it's not an insult. To me, it's like, that's the art of it. You know, that's the difficulty, that's the skill, that's what we do is, you know, the artistry of choreographing a match and creating a character and creating that drama is, to me, greater than just two people fighting. Because you could just do that then, you know? So I think that wrestling in general obviously comes from a background of having pretended it was real. Back in the day, if you really look at its origins and where it comes from, it's, you know, talk about Carney. It was the fights on the carnival where they had like a stooge in the audience who would then come in and pretend to fight the wrestler, and it was all a setup and nobody was in on it except for them. Whereas now it's obviously out in the open, it's a presentation. But because of coming from a background where it had to be kept a secret and then slowly people finding out and people being insulted by the fact that they were being lied to. So that's why to this day we still have this reaction of, oh, it's fake. But you wouldn't say that about a movie. You would say, wow, did you see that stunt? You know, and that's how you should react when you watch a wrestling match. You'd be like, yes, they're not really fighting, no, but wow, did you see that stunt? That's what it is. And that's the art for me.
Scouted that well. Yes, she did. And now DDT. Wow, that found a mark for sure.
That's why, like, even though I dealt with a lot of BS in wrestling, I dealt with a lot of disappointments in wrestling, it's almost like when I would go through that curtain, it didn't matter. Or if I was upset about something, I can like let that energy out. So that's not like festering inside of me. So it almost became like therapy. Or if I was really excited in life or something, it's like I put it into my performance as well. So it's like, for me, I've been very giving of my energy when I go out there. And maybe part of me loves that because that's kind of what life you're supposed to do. You're supposed to like give your energy and then people hopefully give it back.
100% dangerous, yes. Obviously, you would hope that two people, you know, are so well trained and so in tune with everything that nothing could go wrong, but things go wrong all the time. I mean, people have had career-ending injuries from it. People have broken their necks, you know, right in the ring. People have died from it. It only makes sense. And also, as time goes by and has progressed to where the stunts are getting bigger and bigger and the sequences are getting more complex. And like any art or any sport that develops, people always want to top it and get more complicated, more, you know, they want to jump higher and spin more times, you know, and things like that. So definitely it's dangerous and it's just going to continue to get more dangerous.
I would think it can, yeah. I mean, you're trusting somebody else with your body, you know, and accidents happen. So you just never know. And it can be, yeah, on the dangerous side, you know, even just like minor things, but you know, it's a lot. You're putting a lot on your body. You're catching people. You're doing moves where you're dropping people on their head, you know, all these little things. Yeah, there are a lot, you know, maybe even more injuries in wrestling than any other sport.
I definitely see the parallels to dancing. So with the choreography and then also with having a certain rhythm, for example. You know, you have it in dancing as well as wrestling where you might go fast, 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 slow, you know, and then having that ebb and flow of going fast or going slow or, you know, moving around the ring in a certain way and then going the other way. That part of the choreography and the rhythm, that is also very similar.
In wrestling, your character, it's kind of slapstick, like based on like what you look like or whatever, you know. So for instance, like one of the girls at audition that made the cut, she had red hair. Her character is fire. There's a really tall blonde girl. She's Americana. There was a Hawaiian girl. She's Aloha Pacific or something like that. Kita, What are you? Guatemalan and black. What's your thing? I don't know. I ran track my whole life. I played basketball and gymnastics. They're like, okay, so you're athletic. And I'm like, they're like, what's your superpower? Like, what's your character? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't even know I needed one. Kita? You know what I mean? And so they were like, all right, well, we're going to need to brainstorm and get into the character development with each of you. So I had a meeting. And before I had that meeting, though, I called my dad. My dad was in marketing forever. So I was like, Poppy, I need a character. I want to go into this meeting at least with something, even if they shoot it down. Like, I don't just want to be like, I don't know. So he was like, all right, well, go email me words that mean something to you right now. And I was like, okay. I was like, empowerment, feeling good, happy, strong, no bullying, anti-bully, stand up for the underdogs. So I gave him all these words, and he emailed me back. He said, you're the bully buster. And I was like, I am the bully buster. So in my meeting, I was like, I am Kita Maget, the bully buster. And they were like, we love it, but not your last name. So they're like, because you ran track and you are really fast in the ring too, like when you hit the ropes, it's like, where is she? We're going to call you Kita Rush, the bully buster. And that's where Kita Rush, the bully buster started. And then I opened my company called Team Bully Buster.
So when I started training, I used to always wear leg warmers to training. And someone just said, hey, you should do like an 80s character with those leg warmers. And I was like, yeah, I should. And so from there, I just started trying to develop who Delilah was. At first, I was just kind of like this, just a fangirl. And I kind of morphed into, more 80s, more aerobic instructor, and I've just kind of trying to figure out who she is, even still now, I'm evolving who Delilah Doom is, but she, started as just like a mall, a person that loves the mall, and then started getting into the aerobics part of the character, and now I'm trying to figure out where to go from there.
The indies, the independents that I keep referring to, they're just pretty much every promotion that's not WWE. Like, that's just what's up. I mean, you have other ones, like right now you have No Impact, you have AEW. They're still independent, but they're not considered independent. Like, when I say these indie shows, it's more of, these towns, there's different towns throughout the world, and they just have shows. And for people like me that have had some TV time, that's kind of what you do. If you're not in WWE anymore, you just go make your money independently. It's kind of instead of just concentrating on being on one, signed with one company. You're like a freelancer, and you just go work where you want to. You take the bookings you want to. I know sometimes you'd be like, oh, I've always wanted to go to this place. What company is there? Okay, boom, things like that. So that's what the independents are. And the way it works is when somebody wants to be a wrestler, they go to wrestling school. And then when they're able to start to have matches, I'm just talking about they can learn how to dance, translating it to the dance. When they start to learn how to dance, having matches, the next level of learning is to have matches with people that you don't train with, kind of challenging that, like having a match with anybody at any given time. So that's where you start going into the independent world and the indies is, it's just, it's like, you just really pay your dues when you're just trying to get there. Cause I don't care what anyone says. Everyone wants to be in WWE. That's just it. Like, I really feel that, and that's fine. And I feel that people kind of feel ashamed of that, especially if they had maybe a negative experience. So they're like, oh, I don't want to F them or whatever. But like deep down, it's like, that's where the money is. And ultimately when I retired, that's why I retired. I thought, you know what? If I'm going to do this, it has to be worth it. And the only way it's going to be worth it monetarily to get me to leave my home and be on the road making that money is WWE, and I had no interest in going back. So I thought, well, then retire.
I think it's great, AEW is coming to try to give them a little competition, because it's a whole different, style of wrestling. It's a whole different, it's a whole different bubble to step into, It's good to give audiences different types of wrestling, because there's just so many different ways that you can do wrestling, I guess is the way I want to say it. So, and it's opening up a lot of opportunities for people on the indies. They have a new place that they can work towards, or WWE is no longer just the goal. Like, you don't have to just strive to be in WWE. There's so many other options. And even just as an independent wrestler, you don't have to be signed anywhere. You can make it as an independent wrestler these days. And that's phenomenal. And I think that's something that a lot of people didn't have back, years ago. And now it's there for you if you really want to strive to be the best. Yeah, when I showed up, I think they had maybe one or two other girls there. It was mostly guys, so it was very intimidating. But there was this girl named Barbie Hayden. She's a known wrestler in Texas. She went to that school and made it, welcomed with open arms, and you got this, you're gonna kick ass, it's gonna be great. And it just made me feel, a lot more at ease. And I do got this. It was very nice to be like, okay, cool, and have someone to look up to. At the show that I went to, she was on it, so I got to see a match of hers, and so I was like, oh, cool. And then know that she went to the school that I'm interested in, made it even okay, awesome. I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
She went somewhere. She's going places, and this is a good place to start.
I haven't heard enough positive talk about other organizations for me to want to be part of them. I'm also at a place in my life where I have positioned myself where I want to be with the people that I want to be with. I get to meet amazing children. I get to meet amazing clients that want information from me. So putting myself in a situation that might not be gratifying to my soul is something that I don't do. As far as fighting and competing, I still do all the time. Muay Thai is something that I will always do, and Jiu-Jitsu is something that I will always do. I'm a purple belt under Eddie Bravo, 10th Planet, and I fight under Team Victory, Muay Thai and boxing, and I will forever. Those two things I will always compete in. And wrestling, it'd be really cool to get the belt one day and be the tag team champ or the champ. That's a goal for sure. As far as exploring other ideas, I'm kind of good right now, and that's just right now. That's my answer today.
I definitely feel lucky because I had early on, I had all these amazing opportunities start coming at me, being so brand new. I was like, oh wow. But I started at 25. I'm 32 now, so between 25 and 28, I was getting into the groove of things. And then I think about 2016 is when things started to really start happening for me. And, Eli always calls wrestling like a wave. You got to ride the wave. You have your ups and downs. So I started to feel like I was on the up part of the wave around that time. I was wrestling for Rise. I became their Phoenix Arise champion. I became a tag team champion at Shimmer, which was on my bucket list to wrestle for. And I had the opportunity not to only wrestle for them, but to be a champion with Leva Bates. I was a champion at Inspire Pro Wrestling. I was given the opportunity to go to Japan, but that unfortunately didn't work out because I broke my ankle.
So when I was in WWE, no offense, this is just my journey. I just kind of got disappointed when I realized that when you don't have a certain mindset or way about going about things, again, like me, I didn't understand why asking questions got me in trouble sometimes, because I was just in a conversation earlier today about it. It's okay, take this, let's just take a generic person and say they're some wrestling genius. And then I get in trouble for questioning something I don't understand and what they're saying. Maybe I did that in a match that messed the match up, but I don't understand why or how I did. And then I asked a question and then I got in trouble. And it's if they're the wrestling genius, isn't that who I'm supposed to learn from? isn't that the whole point? Like, to help me be better, you ask questions. So like things like that, like just started, I was just like, you know, man, like I'm just like, I ask questions because when I was little, I kept my mouth shut and I saw where that got me. So when I found my voice, I asked questions, you know? And for the record, it was scary to ask questions. Like when I would bring things up, my heart would be racing. I'd be having a panic attack, but I like wanted to know because I wanted to be better, and I'd get in trouble. Oh, Shelly, you're asking too many questions. Asking too many. So that was the beginning for me.
I don't know. I would say I've been pretty lucky, like I said, in the way that people treated me, you know. But I think it was also instilled pretty early on in me that I should hold myself in a certain way, you know. And that's not, by the way, victim shaming from people that do go through things. I mean, I've faced more adversity sort of on a personal level, you know, but not necessarily like in wrestling.
And with TNA, what was kind of frustrating is my character at first, they tried to disguise me as a guy. Miss Double D over here, they used to tape my boobs down and like I would be like a cholo. It was terrible. But so they kept telling me, after you're revealed as being a girl, you know, you're gonna be on the house shows. So I kind of put my auditions and shoots and things like that on hold because what was kind of happening is they're like, okay, we're gonna put you in the house shows this weekend. So then somebody would be like, oh, this weekend's the shoot, can you be there? And I'd be like, no. And then I was never on a house show ever. So they kept telling me, you're gonna be on this house show. And I was just like, dude. So then there was that frustration because I was like, I'm not making nearly as much money as I was in WWE. I moved back to California, so it was way expensive. And they kept telling me that I had this opportunity to make more money on these house shows. And then they would like last minute, oh, you're not on the house show. Or not even telling me. And I'm like, aren't I on the house show? Oh, okay. And so, long story short, I just kind of had it. And there was an independent film and they wanted me to be the lead. And it was going to shoot for a week. And at TNA, they had a pay-per-view that was in Canada, like on a Sunday. And that Monday was when this production wanted me to shoot. So I'd asked TNA if it was okay if like after the pay-per-view, at the time, I was in this group called LAX, and they were feuding with this other group, Team 3D, and they're known for putting people through tables. So I said, how about I go through a table at the pay-per-view so then it puts me out for the week. I go shoot this film so I can make some money, because I was at the point where even though I was on TV, my gas was turned off. So like I had to take cold showers, me and my sister, like she was my roommate, or, you know, like it was tough, but like it looked good because I was on TV, but it was like, dude.
I've heard so many horror stories about people entering into the wrestling world and, you know, how hard it is and the abuse they received. I think I'm part of the most amazing organization that literally values their fighters, their wrestlers, their girls. It's all women, so that's awesome in itself. We're not part of like WWE. It's like they've got their main roster of the guys, and then like the girls are like the bonus part. Like, no, we are the stars. We're not the bonus. I think having Jeannie Buss as co-owner with David McLean, and David McLean being so embedded his life in wrestling, I think, and wanting it to be better and loving women and wanting to see them and giving us the platform to shine, I think has honestly made my experience so positive. Don't get me wrong, there's been, you know, you put any group of people together, someone's gonna get pissed off or not like each other, right? That's to go with anything. But overall, it's been a very pleasant experience, and injuries are not a big deal in our company. We don't really have too many injuries. There's a lot of respect, a lot of love, and a lot of loyalty. And I think those things aren't necessarily categorically part of pro wrestling, but they are for WoW Superheroes. So it's a blessing being part of a good organization.
It's pretty uncommon, I would say. Yeah. I mean, I think in part like I said, it's gotten to the point where people will do a lot more stuff, You know, there's certain moves that, like, I won't take a German suplex because not everybody can land it that you actually land safely on your back. And I see a lot of people landing high up on their necks, and I don't want that injury in my neck. You know, I had a pretty bad trapped nerve for several months, and that was painful enough. So I'm like, I don't necessarily want to crack my neck anymore.
So I started getting injured a lot. So in 2018, I was supposed to go to Japan, and I broke my ankle. And then fast forward, I don't know, maybe 10 months later, I messed up my other ankle really bad. It took me out for like 3 to 4 months. Came back, fast forward a couple months into 2019, I tore my ligaments in my elbow. And that took me out until March of 2020. And I came back, I had like 3 matches back. I was so excited because I had been out for like 9 months. And then the pandemic happened. So, you know, I was, 2016 and 2018 were amazing years. And then I just started getting injured. And like I said earlier, I was told by Eli to always think of wrestling as a wave. And I think about that. And, you know, you have your ups and you're on your downs, but you'll always come back up. And so 2020, I was hoping for it to come back up, but Corona. So I'm just going to keep riding that wave. And then, you know, 2021, hopefully we'll ride back to that tip.
But I see a lot of injuries happening from really stupid things. When I say stupid, I don't mean the wrestlers being stupid. I mean, it's something silly, like maybe there's a small dent in the canvas, or there's a little rip or something, and you know, your foot gets stuck and people just twist their knee and tear their ACL, you know, and then they're out for months. I mean, that's such a common thing. I saw somebody tear their ACL on taking a schoolboy, which is nothing move. You know, so a lot of the time it's something small and something where you don't expect anything bad to happen, and it can create a pretty bad injury. So I would say definitely I've been lucky, and I think I have a pretty good sort of body awareness in terms of like defensive. You know, I stay quite loose. So if I fall in a specific way, I can catch myself pretty good and things like that. But also definitely I've been lucky.
It's funny. It's cool because even the heels give me props and give me respect. Even though I'm a baby face, I'm a badass baby face. So they already know, like, if I'm going in the ring with Kita, she's a high flyer. She's beyond explosive. And I get the respect from that. Being a bully buster and what my character stands for, and then everyone knowing that this is my real life and like what I do outside of the ring is still very empowering at the same time. And I think my character of Kita Rush and Kita Maget, coach, translate in every training at WOW. I'm the one that's always like, good job, girls, and like who I am really just comes out. So I'm very well accepted, thankfully, and by the high levels, by the brand news, by everybody, and that's a really good feeling.
So back in 2018, I believe, I won Female Wrestler of the Year here in SoCal. So, and I also, me and my fiance Eli, we won Tag Team of the Year in SoCal, and that was the first time a woman had ever been on that won something other than the Women's Wrestler of the Year. So I got to be placed in both brackets, and it's definitely something, you know, like, I feel weird saying, oh wow, I'm one of the top in SoCal, but I'm one of the top in SoCal. And that's an amazing feeling.
It didn't make sense to me because I saw how the women were a draw. And the women brought in a good portion of the merchandise. So there's the money, right?
I never sort of really thought of myself as a woman wrestler. You know, I didn't grow up thinking of myself as limited by gender in any aspect. And I actually talked to my mom about it recently, and she said that she actually purposefully put, that thought into my head that gender wasn't really relevant when it comes to what you want to do, because a female body can do the same things as a male body. So I didn't need a female role model for me to want to wrestle or for me to go and pursue it. And I was lucky too, because in both sort of Hammerlock UK, and then I went on to wrestle for FWA, which was sort of the hotbed at the time. In both of those promotions, I was very lucky that they just treated me as normal. They didn't baby me or single me out or make me feel any different than any of the others. So I was just one of the wrestlers, and that was really cool.
Yes, definitely. When I first started, there weren't very many matches that had women on it, especially, we're in Texas. There weren't a lot of women wrestlers too back when I started. And as the years have gone by, I've seen a lot more girls and women getting involved in wrestling and realizing, we can do this too. And then you start seeing, more matches on the card, and then you see them main eventing and then doing just, all just full on all women shows. So it's definitely, from when I started and now, it's been a big, awesome change.
So I don't know much about the women's evolution. I hope it is what it seems like it is. I just have a hard time believing that it's all nice and prim and proper as it seems. And it's not dogging, it's just that it is what it is. And there's just certain things that will never change. They can get better. But what I will say is I feel that a lot of the girls in the past, especially in WWF/E, a lot of them have the same kind of look and vibe. So I will say that it has been cool to see that girls that would have never got looked twice, even in my time, they're the main chicks now. So I think that's really cool that it's gotten to there. I just hope that they're getting paid properly and getting treated properly,
Shelly Martinez up first.
Doing so phenomenal right now, but I just think it's more places that don't normally have women on their show. I think they're going to finally start realizing, we have to, you can't stop ignoring a whole group of wrestlers. We're here, there's a whole, there's somebody to represent everybody out there. And I think people are realizing they need to have inclusive and involve everybody and not just, shut out a whole, category of wrestlers. And I think they're realizing that they want more eyes, they want more fans. They got to start, evolving with the times.
Everything that's happened in wrestling, it's just made me who I am. And that's why it irks me so much when people are like, she's just a bitter washed. It's you have no idea how grateful I am for everything that happened in wrestling. Everything. Not just, and I, maybe I'll share things on Twitter, right? I'll post something, a feeling about something. And then people are attacking it. And it's dude, there was a time I couldn't talk about this because I was hurt over it. I was bitter over it. That's when I don't talk about things. But when I can talk about it, it means it's set with me. I've accepted it. I'm familiar with it. I'm understanding it. And so I'm just kind of sharing that, because what people don't understand, whether they're a disgruntled fan or a old coworker or peer who just gets rubbed wrong by me, what they don't understand is the reason why I use things like Twitter to share how I feel or my thought on something, and I'm being real blunt, is because there's a ton of other wrestlers following me, young wrestlers, and a lot of female wrestlers. And I'm trying to be grizzled vet Shelly, giving them listen to old Aunt Shelly. She knows, that's all. And times where people tell me, oh, you share too much. You shouldn't say that. You tell the fans too much. You post too much. Well, guess what? When I get texts, phone calls, emails from people, and they're opening up to me wow, when you post that, I'm going through that. That's why I do it. So people can go ahead, just for record, people can go ahead and tell me I shouldn't be this way, but guess what? That's what's up. And that's what I'm in the business for, is to be there for those people, because there was a very small few people that like were there for me like that. One of them is Francine from ECW. Like, she's one of my good friends to this day. It's like, when you're in it in wrestling, like I said, it's a different entity. It just helps you not lose your mind when you know you're not by yourself and there's somebody, at least one person that understands. And I think it's really cool, because when I had Francine, it's because we worked together and then we built a friendship, or else I wouldn't have had that. Whereas now there's strangers that follow me that are wrestlers, these independent girls, and they're able to see what I have to say because of social media. So just know that I don't do it to be bitter old Shelly, all disgruntled Shelly. I do it to like help others out there that are struggling with the same things that I have.
My highlights. Woo! I've done a lot of awesome things. So, like I said, when I worked for Rise, I had this awesome feud and storyline with Shotzi Blackheart and Rosemary. I was their Phoenix or Rise champion. So I really loved working that feud with Shotzi. We did a whole bunch, like a whole feud that spanned from the US to England. You know, we got to wrestle in England together. And so that was a really amazing working for Shimmer, just starting off just wrestling and then becoming a tag champion. One of like bucket list check off. I've got to wrestle on Raw and SmackDown, which was a great experience. I never thought that would happen, and I even got to cut a promo live on Raw, you know, before my match, which is just something you don't think you're gonna ever do in your life. No, I was there doing extra work, and then it was when Nia Jax was coming up, and then they needed someone to work with her, so there was just me and a few other girls, and I just got lucky. I was I think the smallest one, so but then they told me, oh, you're gonna cut a promo, and that's the scariest thing in my life, because it was live on national television. I had to memorize this. I had to memorize it, and it was very nerve-wracking, but it was awesome. You know, walking out there and just, you know, seeing all these thousands and thousands of people, and at the time there, it was where were we? Corpus Christi, I believe, and there were people that actually knew who I was, you know, from the local shows. So it was really cool to have people like, hey, Delilah. So I was like, okay, cool. It's like, pretend you're back at home, you know, no problem. You're not on TV, just act normal. But it was super exciting, and definitely just a great experience, both with Nia and when I wrestled Carmella as well, and that was awesome.
Nothing has ever made me want to quit. When the training center for WOW was moved to Long Beach, that's a hard drive after running a business. And I was opening my business in the same year that we got on Access Television. So the demand of like going to training 5 days a week was really hard, but I would literally teach all day from 8 to 8. Or 8 to 7. Training was at 8 o'clock. I would be done at 11 and I would get home at midnight. And that's literally my life, from 8 in the morning to midnight at night, to do it all over again. Never made me want to quit, just hated it. Hated that aspect of it. I hate sitting. I hate sitting in just sitting. Like, I don't want to sit. I don't want to sit in a car. I don't want to go on a road trip. That's like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like that thought of like, let's drive to Seattle. No way. So for me, that was just the hard part. Ready? In my wave of life, I just do what I can, honestly. If I can train, I'm going to. If it's too much, I don't put it on my plate. Unless it's my job, you know, where I have to. And that's pretty much how I live. I just deal with what I can at the moment.
It's just something I've always wanted to do, and then I'm experiencing it. I'm doing it. I've had all these amazing things that I've done, and it's just, I love learning. I'm always constantly learning, always training, always learning new things to add to, like, you know, my back pocket, into my tool belt, and to always just be evolving as much as I can, and just getting as good as I can, trying to become the best version of me that I possibly can do.
wrestling for me doesn't just mean WWE. Wrestling for me is like the journey leading up to WWE and then the journey after WWE, like helped me as a human, like helped me as a woman in this crazy ass world.
Shelly taunting her. Oh! Into the guardrail. She could have killed her with that.
But now I look at it as all of that stuff, good and bad. It just like made me who I am today, and like how the world is today, I'm good with that.